The newest wave of Innistrad Crimson Vow spoilers have been revealed, and we've got zombie doublers, we've got demon doublers, and my personal favorite, crazy green mythic rares.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered to talk about more delicious Innistrad Crimson Vow spoiler cards. We've got a bunch of cool stuff to look at. So let us not waste any time and dive right in with this fellow right here, the Cultivator Colossus. So it's got a hefty mana cost. 3 green and 4 for a star plant beast. It has trample. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Pretty standardized sort of ability to see for green tied into the land, and it is like almost a nature elemental in some ways because it is a plant beast, right? Obviously it doesn't count as an elemental, but has that flavor vibe to it. And when Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card and repeat this process. So admittedly, when you first look at the card, you go, okay, you know what? 7 mana, and this thing is going to be what? A 7/7 trampler if I have 7 lands when I play it. And then when I put it out, I can play a land from my hand and get to draw a card. Like when you just look at it on the surface of drawing and playing it regularly, it honestly doesn't feel that hype and mythical. But when you realize that you can use this in cheat it into play strategies, well, that changes things considerably. If you can get this card out relatively fast and you still have a bunch of lands in your hand, then you get to play all your lands and replace all of those with card draw, which is pretty significant. So this one is when I look at it, my brain goes, I want to dismiss it kind of to a degree because it's like, how good is it going to be? I'll admit, 7 mana for a 7/7 that when it comes into play, lay a land, draw a card, because that's what it feels like at first, like blush. It doesn't feel that impressive, but I do feel like there are ways to make this thing work, and I do love the artwork. I like the concept of this. It's this beast that's made up of plants, and so as more lands come under your control, it just grows stronger. It's like you connect with another land, and then all these vines whip up out of the ground all over the Cultivator Colossus, and it grows bigger. Or it could just be that it like sinks its claws down into the earth, and energy flows up into it. It definitely has an interesting vibe, and it is a very different denizen of Innistrad. This isn't the sort of thing we normally see, but I dig it. Moving on, we have Concealing Curtains. Oh, what's behind the curtain? 1 black for a wall. Clearly it has Defender. 0/4. Woo! Pay 1 black and 2. Transform Concealing Curtains. Activate only as a sorcery. So the front side of it is just, all right, take a look at this. I got a little 0/4 wall. You can see that this is in some kind of library. And it's weird because you have these curtains pulled, almost like there might be a painting behind it. But then right in front of the curtains, somebody's put a table for some unknowable reason. Like you'll see when we get to the other side. You can see actually there's a couple little appendages that are making their way out from behind this curtain. So what exactly is going on? But more importantly, why is there a table placed right there in front? Who did that? Because let's take a look at the other side. The other side is Revealing Eye. It's a 3/4 eye horror, and it's got Menace. When this creature transforms into Revealing Eye, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player discards that card, then draws a card. So you can see the artwork shows this gigantic eye that's burst forth from behind the curtain, knocking the table over. Why was the table put there? You know what I mean? Like, it's fun that it works in the artwork the way it does, where he's just like, boom, barreling into the table and knocking it over. But why was it put there in the first place? Because this eye doesn't have, like, Defender. it can totally attack. So if it's going to be mobile and moving around and the person who owns the home knows it, then why do you have it set up this way? I guess it's just for dramatic imagery. It looks pretty cool though. And it's nutty when you look at it and you think about the idea behind this, right? It's a revealing eye. You can use it for one of two purposes. You can use it to look deeply into your opponent's mind and pick the biggest threat to you, possibly replacing it with something more threatening. Although we know from seeing Vendilion Clique in action that in most cases, they're not going to end up getting something better anyway. So it's almost always a great idea to use it on your opponent. However, you can totally use it on yourself as well. So you could literally be in your library and you summon this eye out of the wall and it comes out with its tentacles and then it just reaches its tentacles out into your mind and you tell it specifically, remove these thoughts. I don't want to think about Becky anymore. She made me sad. Remove my thoughts of Becky from my brain and make me think about something else. You're just randomly drawing another card. No, it's a memento of Becky. Curse you, revealing eye. Either way, this is a cool concept as a horror that stares deep into the mind of whoever you want it to. I like it. It's a funky little card. And it's always cool to see these crazy eye beasts in Magic. It's got a beholderish vibe, but is not a beholder. Moving on, we've got Sigarda's Imprisonment. Now, I'll admit this isn't actually a super powerful card, but it's interesting to me because it is a storyline element. So, 1 white and 2 for Sigarda's Imprisonment. It's an aura that says enchanted creature can't attack or block. Pretty standard fare for white. And 1 white and 4, exile enchanted creature, create a blood token. So we've seen enough, like enchantments that say, white enchantments that say creatures can't attack or block, they're a dime a dozen, right? And even ones that will remove the creature they're enchanted to will totally come up fairly often. But this one creates a blood token. And if you take a look at the artwork, you can see this shows Sigarda imprisoned with all these like crimson fabric tendrils wrapped around her and her wings around in the front as well. It's absolutely astounding artwork with the candles arrayed in her feathers. She's been set up in this ornamental decorative fashion and you can basically, I mean, it's exiling her, but it really is sacrificing her for her blood. And that makes me wonder, does Sigarda get sacrificed? Do Edgar and Olivia like feast on her blood? And do the other vampires feast on this angel blood to become even more powerful? I'm very, very curious. And I really like the artwork with her like framed in front of this stained glass window. Very, very nice. Moving on. We've got Inspired Idea. This is a interesting and risky Magic card. 1 blue and 2 for a sorcery that has cleave cost of 2 blue and 3. So, draw 3 cards. Your maximum hand size is reduced by 3 for the rest of the game. So you have 2 options. You can either pay 5 mana and draw 3 cards, which is bog standard. There's nothing special about that, and it feels completely like a normal everyday Magic card. However, when you play it for 1 blue and 2, and you get to draw 3 cards, that is significant, because the majority of cards that cost a blue and 2 let you draw 2 cards maximum. So that extra card is significant card advantage, but it does come at a big cost. Giving up 3 cards out of your maximum hand size is nothing to sneeze at. But at the same time, having a maximum hand size of 4 cards isn't really that big a problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're playing a hardcore control deck and you need a big mid of spells, then this is not ideal. But if you're playing through your cards at a regular clip, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? I'm probably not going to have 5, 6, 7 cards in my hand by the end of any turn. So going down to a maximum size of 4 isn't really that big a deal. Obviously, if you play multiple of these, then it starts to get a little more difficult to deal with. 2 of these, and now your maximum hand size is 1. And that is a much bigger problem, right? But ultimately, interesting design space to move into. The flavor text says, stitching is an ever-evolving field, with each new advancement reaching a new height of horror. And you can see that you have literally a stitcher here. He has an inspiring idea. He's holding it up. Yeah, I figured it out in his little laboratory. But to me, this artwork, it feels boring. I'm just going to straight up say it. The card itself is fairly exciting, but the artwork is boring. It does transmit the concept. You know, you've got the crunched up paper to show that he's been trying to come up with an idea, but I don't know. I don't know if it's like the color palette or just the idea, but this artwork feels fairly bland to me. It's just personal taste. Moving on. We've got Falkenroth Forebear. So this is 1 black and 2 for a 3/1. It is a vampire with flying. It can't block. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a blood token, and pay 1 black, sack 2 blood tokens, and you return this from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is another variation of the concept that we see frequently in Black, where you have a creature that can't be used as a blocker and can be recurred many times from the graveyard over and over. This one has flying and creates blood tokens that can be used for its own return, but also for other purposes, because there's a bunch of cards that care about blood tokens. And in some ways, this one is more difficult to return from the graveyard because it does require you to have built up 2 blood tokens. So if your opponent can answer this card right away, you may not be able to really get it rolling. But for 3 mana, this feels like a solid little package. The fact that it has flying is ultimately what makes it feel like it can work. You can make this work in a deck. Taking a look at the artwork, you can see like an old matron-style vampire who's wandering along through whatever house. And interestingly enough, a lot of the time we see like really bright rose petals kind of floating around in the artwork, but this one is like a more dark kind of red with everything that's floating around her, I guess to represent the blood tokens. I'll admit that this is also, like, it's not like there's anything wrong with this artwork, but when I look at it, I just go, all right, it is what it is. It doesn't get me super excited. Maybe it's her. Actually, I really like the background details of the home, like the hall, the high like vault kind of windows and everything, the chandeliers. It looks great, but overall, solid card. Artwork's all right. Moving on. We've got Curse of Hospitality. This is a weird one. 1 red and 2 for an enchant player curse. And what it says is creatures attacking enchanted player have trample. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. The wording of this card is done in such a way that some people may be confused by it. So it's pretty straightforward. If I play this curse on you, then any creatures that attack you, my creatures, anybody else's creatures that attack you, will have trample. And each one of my creatures that hits you, I'm going to get to exile the top card of your deck, and I can play it for the rest of the turn. That's how it works. So basically, if I attack you with 3 creatures and they all get through and hit you, then I'm going to exile the top 3 cards off your deck. And, well, I mean, you're going to exile them, but I get to play them. And I can use my mana as if it was mana of any color. So it's not too shabby. It's an interesting card. The artwork is absolutely amazing. I really, really like the artwork. You have this lady standing here in this like white dress, but she has a red cloak. And that's the first thing that like my eyes were drawn to, is this woman who's like, it's done on like, what do you want to call it? Like maybe like a Dutch angle-ish almost for her, where, you know what I mean? We're not seeing her from straight on. We're seeing her tilted to the side, which gives a twisted world perspective. And there's this hole in the wall behind her with this darkness, and it almost looks like chains or like lines of darkness are emanating behind her, and one is running across her dress. But what's most striking to me is that her cloak is actually billowing out into like what looks like a wave of blood mist, and there are these vampires flying in towards her. And I didn't even notice it at first. At first, I just saw a lady standing there, her cloak flowing out, and then I went, oh, look at those vampires flowing in from the side. And it's like you're twisted one way, these guys are all flying in, like you've been cursed to give them hospitality. It's easier for them to make their way to you because they have trample. Like, this is such a crazy concept, and the artwork is absolutely amazing. It's so evocative. Like having these 4 dark vampires surging in towards this lady dressed in white with their pale face, and she's in this very static, stationary pose where the vampires have more of this energetic flow, like there's no chance for her to escape or anything. I love this artwork very, very much. Moving on. We've got Hamlet Vanguard. We've got Mr. Shields. 1 green and 2 for a 1/1 human warrior. He's got Ward 2. I like Ward. It's a funky little ability. Hamlet Vanguard enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it for each other non-token human you control. So this could be a big old beefy boy ready to guard the village. Although how much damage are you going to do when you just got shields? I guess you could just smack the shields into people. Whack! Whack! But look at that crazy glowing sigil that's coming off him. And I like the pose where he's just like hunkered down. He's got his arms extended. It looks like he could withstand a serious amount of blows off of those shields, right? Pretty solid card overall. I don't know like how much the like human tribal thing is going to do overall, so I don't know how powerful this card will be, but it's got a cool vibe. Then we've got Consuming Tide. 2 blue and 2 for a sorcery that says each player chooses a non-land permanent they control. Return all non-land permanents not chosen this way to their owner's hand. Then you draw a card for each opponent who has more cards in their hand than you. This feels really strong. 4 mana to bounce everything on the board aside from lands and 1 permanent of each player's choice is pretty crazy. You know, like for only 4 mana. And then they stack on the fact as well that if your opponent bounces more cards to their hand so that their hand's bigger than yours, you get to draw a card as well. Like just in one-on-one, this feels like it's going to be solid. In games like Commander, feels like it'll be absolutely crazy. And I love the artwork. So good. You know, you've got the Consuming Tide. So this massive tide comes in, and you can see that there's just all this wreckage strewn about, right? You've got little broken pieces of wood floating in the background. You can see a ship that's been abandoned, theoretically maybe even by the person that we're seeing on the rocks. There's barrels and buckets and things floating, and just this one person who's essentially marooned on this tiny little rocky outcropping. It gives that feeling of isolation and transmits the concept that all is lost save this one poor soul. Very, very cool and feels very, very blue. Moving on. We've got another blue card. Blue's got some good cards today. Necro Duality. Well, I was about to say vampire doubling when I meant zombie doubling. Zombie doubler! 1 blue and 3 for an enchantment that says, whenever a non-token zombie enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Now, this to me feels like one of those cards that slowly but surely over time is just going to keep cranking in value. The number of people who love zombies is right up there. I mean, I wouldn't rank it maybe on the same level as slivers because there's a lot of sliver fiends, but there are a lot of people who love zombies, right? So this kind of card is going to... Are you playing zombies? You can splash this into a zombie deck for a blue. I think it's kind of... I think it's kind of a little skeezy of Wizards to make this mythic because it doesn't feel like mythic level power. You know what I mean? Like, they make enchantments that are rare that double tokens. This is making a token copy of non-token zombies. I feel like this was only made mythic rare because they wanted to have it have a high secondary market value over time as something that they could like gain reprint equity in. I feel like this could have easily been printed at rare, but it was intentionally made mythic based on just an attempt fully, nothing to do with the power level of the card, balancing environments or anything, purely from a financial standpoint they made it mythic rare, and I can't really get behind that, right? But I can get behind the concept of the card. Creating extra copies of all your zombies feels absolutely great. And obviously, I mean, the fact is they can't let this copy tokens as well. It would be absolutely crazy. And I love the artwork where you can see it's 2 copies of the same guy and they're both just trying to shove each other away. I don't want to be connected to you anymore. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how this works, like in terms of the magic behind it. Like, how does this enchantment automatically just create an additional copy of zombies? But it certainly does speak to a level of Stitcher expertise when you can use magic on this level and you can put multiples of these out. They stack. If you had 2 of these out, you get to make 2 extra copies. It's so crazy. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is more powerful than I'm giving it credit for. But I feel like that mythic symbol's just there because Wizards want to milk the zombie players. Ooh, milking a zombie. Gross. Okay, let's move on. Moving on to the Dreadfast Demon. We went from a zombie doubling to demon doubling, even more so. The demon, this is crazy. This is a nutty concept for a demon on multiple levels. So, you've got Dreadfeast Demon. 1 black and 5 gets you a 6/6 flyer. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a non-demon creature. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Dreadfast Demon. And the token will have that same ability. So they'll keep doing that. So the first one, you sack a creature at the end of your turn. Now you got 2 of these demons. At the end of that turn, now all of a sudden, you sack 2 more creatures. Now you got 4 of those demons. They keep darkly doubling, right? But you have to have people to feed to them. And you have no choice about it, right? It's not an option. You have to sacrifice a non-demon creature if you have it. So the Dreadfeast Demon basically is like, yo, I'm taking somebody with me over to the lake, bro. I'll let you pick, but somebody's going. And you're like, all right, take Timmy over there. And the demon's like, all right, come on, Timmy. We're going for a ride. And he's flying him over the lake. And Timmy's like, this is so beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Demon. And then these claws rise up out of the water. And Timmy's like, wait, what's going on? And the Dreadfast Demon chuckles. And he's like, you did it for my friend. And he drops Timmy into the water. And then another demon's like, bro, thanks for the meal. Chomp, chomp, chomp. And flows up. And then they go and do it, and then just more and more of them doing it over and over. And it makes me think, like, on one hand, yeah, demons, we're going to eat you, we're going to force sacrifices. That makes perfect sense for demons, right? But it's very weird that these demons share with each other. It's a free meal for another demon. Normally when you sack creatures, it's so the demon can eat it. And most demons have a lot of self-interest, don't care about other demons, or consider them competition. But in this case, this is a demon actively bringing more of its kind out, so it is different and just a fun card. I love the artwork, which literally shows somebody being fed to raise up another one of these demons, and I love the fact that the world essentially feels like it's on fire in this artwork. It's got a heavy sort of danger vibe to it behind the demon as well, which works quite well for me. Next up, we have the Cemetery Prowler. I told you we had dope green mythics because this is great. 2 green and 1 for a 3/4 wolf. It has vigilance because why not? Why not just slap vigilance on it? Whenever Cemetery Prowler enters the battlefield or attacks, exile a card from a graveyard. I love the fact that that is also triggered on entering the battlefield and is not just an attack trigger. Because when you get to the bottom, you see why you care about the exiling. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card type they share with cards exiled with Cemetery Prowler. So basically, the way I view this card is, in most circumstances, at least for me when I play it, gonna end up putting it out and exiling a creature from somebody's graveyard. Hopefully there will already be a creature in somebody's graveyard. I'm going to exile that. And then all of a sudden, all my creatures cost 1 less to cast. So just looking at this guy on that surface, it's 3 mana for a 3/4 vigilance. And every turn, you have the ability to play your creatures for 1 less mana. That's not even taking into account the fact that this will actually be able to exile other card types as well. Are you playing with enchantments? Are you playing with the classes from Dungeons and Dragons? Great. Eat an enchantment. They'll be cheaper to put out. Do you play artifacts in your deck? Great. Eat an artifact with the Cemetery Prowler. Now your artifacts are cheaper. Like, for me, it'll be creature first because my deck is creature heavy and I want to put the creatures out. But then it's just going to be eat all the different permanent types. And on top of that, it stops really obnoxious combinations from getting set up over and over. It's like, oh, you keep bringing your Blood in the Snow card back from your graveyard or other cards back from your graveyard as part of a strategy. Well, too bad. Here's the thing. My wolf ate it. My wolf ate your spell. Like, this totally covers sorceries, instants, like every type of card. You eat their planeswalker, boom, your planeswalkers cost less. Like, I feel like this guy is going to be an absolute all-star. The other green mythic we looked at, I'm like, okay, I don't know. Maybe in a combo deck in the right home you could be busted good. But Cemetery Prowler feels like Value Town. He's a 3/4 for 3 with Vigilance, which is already a solid body. But he accelerates virtually any strategy you could conceive of, right? Which is great. Like, it's just so good. When I look at the card, I go, man, this feels like a pushed mythic. You know what I mean? Time will tell. Who knows? The power of the standard environment has gone up. But I feel like this guy is pushed. And looking at the artwork, you've got the moon in the background with all those crazy little wisp lines. I want to know what those moonlight flickers are. And then in the forefront here, we have this big old wolf. Like, think about how big this wolf has to be a 3/4. He's going to be bigger or as big as an elephant. And you can see he's got multiple skulls just hanging out of his mouth. It's so intense and intimidating. I love it. I'm gonna play 4 of these guys. Anyhow, that wraps up today's spoilers. Big thank you to all my patrons for supporting my channel. I'm gonna leave an Innistrad lore video up on the screen for you to enjoy, and I will see you, my friends, in the next video.